Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. On today's show, we have Senator Heidi Heitkamp joining us, and we're very proud to have you today, Senator.
Thank you. I love how you say my name.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Senator Heidi Heitkamp? Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
As we do with every guest, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I think most North Dakotans know me pretty well. I grew up south of Fargo in a little town called Manador. We like to say my family was 1/10 the population. I have 6 siblings and left home, went to UND, went to law school in Oregon, and came back and really started a life of public service, I'd like to believe. Got married to a wonderful man, and I have 2 beautiful children, both now young adults, and greatly honored to be serving my state and so many of the people that I know and love in the United States Senate.
And Senator, you know that, I remind you, there's a lot of new population in North Dakota.
There is.
So they may not know
no,
you as
you're
well.
right.
Yeah.
And I forget that. I forget, it used to be if I walked into, the grocery store, everyone knew me. And now it's like, how do you spell that last name? And you're kind of like, whoa, this is a different experience. But, it's a wonderful opportunity to be on your show and introduce myself to your audience.
Well, with that said, we're going to talk about a number of issues today. Let's start with lifting the ban on exporting U.S. crude oil.
Well, this is a policy. I don't know that a lot of people know that you cannot export crude oil from the lower 48. There is an exception for Prudhoe Bay up in Alaska, but this is a remnant of the 1970 oil embargo policy. It's never become an issue because North America and really the United States has not had an excess of oil where we are producing more oil than what we can refine. That's happening right now, and it's helping depress North Dakota prices. It's helping depress American prices. Now, the trick in this, because it's probably counterintuitive, is by opening up oil exports, we will actually lower gasoline prices. And people have a hard time understanding that, but gasoline that's refined in this country usually is heavier crudes, and a lot of it's imported, and it's imported at higher prices. But also the gasoline here is priced based on the European price or the global price. And so letting our gas into the markets, our oil into the market, most economists believe that it will lower prices. The other thing is that you need to remember when you're evaluating this issue is that we can, in fact, and do export gasoline. So we can't export crude, but we can export gasoline. That makes no sense. I was recently at the McCain Institute and heard a speech by Tony Blair, who said one of the things that the United States can do to help stabilize global geopolitical conflict is provide energy security. And so our exporting to Europe and to Eastern Europe and competing with oil production in Russia, competing with oil production in Iran is hugely important in terms of soft power. So it's good for consumers, it's good for energy self-sufficiency, because if we do not find a market for this product, we'll basically see more and more wells not being drilled and perhaps some wells being shut in. And so this is an issue I've been working very closely on. I started on this issue before oil prices actually went down, because for me, at the end of the day, it's a case of fundamental fairness. Our corn and wheat can find international markets, so should our oil.
Okay, but how does North Dakota's oil boom play into the situation? Are we just one of the players? Or?
I think the reason why we're confronting this issue right now is because we're in an oversupply. Well, once North Dakota produced over 1 million barrels of oil a day, we're a huge contributor to that supply of domestic crude. So we, as a consequence, have in fact kind of driven this issue of oil exports because we're part of the supply.
Well, and now turning a little bit on rail safety with some of the accidents and how that relates. Can you, is anything going on with that?
Well, the DOT has released their rule. I think everybody's in the process of evaluating it. We have heard that there are going to be some lawsuits. I think that's unfortunate. I think the rest of the country knows that we need to continue to have access to the rails to move this product to market. We hope there are going to be more pipelines, but that's a long-term strategy. And in the meantime, we need to make sure that this product is safe on the rails. I look at it 3 ways. Number one, the best thing that we can do is keep the train on the track. And so to avoid the accident, there's positive train control, there's more inspections, there's things we can do to help keep the train on the track. Second thing we can do is we can mitigate the consequences when the train goes off the track, and that involves tank car standards. I went out to Heimdall and saw the accident, and it's incredible what pressure and heat on a flammable material will do to carbon steel. It was amazing. And we had a great experience out there after the derailment with the train, with firefighters saying they were so grateful for the training that they had received because they knew exactly what was going to go on. So that's the third step. Once we see the train derail, making sure our first responders are ready to respond in a way that keeps them safe and keeps the community safe. And so, you know, since the Castleton accident, I think that we are just getting smarter and smarter and smarter. I think the couple controversies are about the design of the tank car, and the other controversy is on a braking system that the railroads disagree with DOT's evaluation that would make the transport of this product safer.
Okay.
So
well, we'll see what
it's
happens.
Tough issue.
It is.
But you know, I will tell you that the top priority is keeping that product safe on the rails.
Sure. Well, do you think enough is being done in North Dakota oil country in terms of infrastructure needs?
No. This is a tough question because unfortunately we're not very good partners with North Dakota. North Dakota did some surge funding. I was recently with the mayor of Watford City where he was saying, yes, we're grateful, but let me tell you, it's not enough. I'll tell you, McKenzie County now is kind of in the major play that's happening right now. McKenzie County sent $1.2 billion to the state of North Dakota during a time period, and they only got $40 million back. Now that's changed, but they continue to need those additional resources. When I say we're not being good partners, you know, we have a surface transportation bill, i.e. the highway bill, and we keep kicking the can down the road doing short-term extensions. We just did one before we left where we extended it yet another month. This is absolutely critical. Our infrastructure is 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s infrastructure. That's true in North Dakota. It's true across the world or across the country, and we are experiencing more and more problems as a result of it. The American Trucking Association tells me that if you raise the gas tax, that would cost them less than what they're spending because of congestion and because of problems with bottlenecks. And so we need to not be penny wise and pound foolish. The big debate isn't whether we need the money. The question is, where do you get it? And that's been the struggle.
Okay. Well, and of course with the industry that's come, a lot of different things come to the communities and to the state, and one you've been addressing and looking at is human trafficking. Can you talk about what's going on?
When I ran for office, I reacquainted and went around and visited with my law enforcement friends, and they kept talking about this wave of prostitution that had come to North Dakota, and the more you looked into it, and I started thinking about it, the more you peeked behind the curtain, you said that might not be prostitution. What that might be is trafficking. That may be the most unfortunate people in the world caught into this web. And that's certainly true for minors. And so when I got to Washington, I was asked to serve on the Homeland Security Committee. Chairman asked me, what do you want to pursue? I said, I want to look into this issue of human trafficking and slavery. And I think he was a little surprised by that. But behind me was another former Attorney General, Jeff Chiesa from New Jersey, who had he had the Super Bowl coming and was really concerned about it. And from that experience and bringing people in, particularly concerned about Native American children, because you know a lot of people think that you know this is Laura. I say Laura Ingalls Wilder, you know, bounding through the prairie and a dark force snatches them up. You know, that's typically not, that can happen, but it's typically not who's victimized because of human trafficking. It is the most marginalized. There's probably children who have already been abused, perhaps sexually. There are children who are homeless and don't have any other place to go, and they engage in what's called survival sex, or they just start becoming more and more marginalized and they're in the life. And so we've got to address this problem. Over 80% of all victims in our country are in fact our girls. They're American citizens. reasons. We have a problem with importing this problem as well. But I've been working with Cindy McCain on international solutions. I've been working with the Missing and Exploited Children's Group out of Las Vegas, who are doing some great facial identity. So there's a lot of things that are happening. But I will tell you, the one disappointment that I've had in working on this issue is that we haven't been able to reauthorize the homeless and runaway youth program. That's the prevention piece of this. We also know that we need to identify it early on. We have a new bill with Susan Collins, who's a great friend from Maine, looking at how we can train medical professionals and establish best practices for early identification by medical professionals. Our best estimate is that victims of human trafficking will, in fact, a third of them will have seen a primary care physician or emergency room physician. And we need to make sure that the staff and those physicians are, in fact, trained to identify human trafficking. So this is a long-term problem. Just as we saw in the 90s, the build-out of domestic violence, trying to get to best practices, we've raised awareness. I think it's become more than just, you know, an activist issue. It's a kitchen table issue now, what we can do about it. And we need to come up with the solutions that not only treat the victims, not only rescue the victims and prosecute horrible, horrible people who do this, but we need to look at strategies for prevention.
And has there been any additional training or law enforcement to understand
Absolutely.
how to go after this?
We've brought in the Department of Homeland Security and done a ton of training with all these groups. That training's just going to get better. And one of the things, Cindy McCain's coming the end of the month. She's going to be my guest, and we're going to do a series of meetings about human trafficking. She's not only a national champion, she is a global champion on human trafficking. We become fast friends. We're going to ride the Clydesdales, or at least hang out with the Clydesdales at the McQuaid tournament, which we're really excited about. But I think we're going to continue to get better and better at solving this problem.
Okay. Well, now let's turn to agriculture issues, probably one near and dear to your heart. You're currently doing some ag-related events in North Dakota. In fact, in the paper today, I saw where I guess you were recently at an event with women in farming. But talk about some of those.
Well, one of the challenges we have in farming is workforce. And I always like to tell people, why do you care about women? You know, it's always women, women, women. I said, because they're half the workforce. They're half of the potential workforce. And so, but the work that they do, I think in the past you would ask someone, well, what do you do? Well, I'm just a farm wife. Well, let's number one, take the just out of that, and let's talk about what you do. I run parts. I'm the CFO. I'm the chief financial officer. I do all the books. I am the logistics coordinator. I mean, I could give you all the corporate labels for what women do on the farm, and a lot of them are the operators. And so it was one of the most fun events I've done in a long time, being in a room with 30, 40 women who are all engaged in agriculture, some who have been doing it for years and years, like my friend Vanessa Coomer down in Colfax, and some who are just coming back to take over the family farm for their father. It's a young woman from Leeds who said, you know, she tells people that she's taking over the family farm, and the first question they ask her is, don't you have a brother? And those are kind of the remnants of a time gone by, and we need to get that workforce up to we need manpower to run agriculture. And I'm a big believer. I tell people every day I wake up, and my first thing that I do when I go to work is I say, what are we going to do for rural America? And why is it important that I do that? Because I'm one of the few people who probably does. Mm-hmm.
Well, I found it interesting as I read the article that a woman says, I'm a farmer. Some people ask, well, what else do you do? But if you ask a man, what do you do? And he says, I'm a farmer. That's it. They don't think about it. That's interesting.
But it does show the bias. And it was interesting because as I talked to the panelists and a lot of the women who attended after the event, I realized a lot of the language I used is probably not appropriate. And so it was a good lesson. You know, right now we're challenged on the farm. By that I mean we still have incredibly high input prices, and our commodity prices are not good. We're looking at building out supply, but I will tell you, I can give you all the lowdown on what happens when we have low commodity prices, high input prices, what the bankers are telling me, and what we're seeing in terms of weather patterns and the kind of day-to-day RFS and the day-to-day that I do. But I know that the future of agriculture is in technology, It's in better seed varieties. It is in making sure that we're better educated about lowering our inputs, and so we are using advanced technologies, things like UAS or remotely piloted aircraft. I think that it is in research that they're doing here in Fargo at NDSU, and a great cooperative project with USDA, NDSU, and with the corn growers. It was fascinating. We also did that. But I would also tell you that it's got to be in exports. 95% of all consumers in this world don't live in the United States. And we know that the United States has some of the best farmland in the world. We know that we can help feed a hungry world, and that we need to continue to do everything that we can to participate, because a world that is not hungry is a much more stable world.
Okay. Well, we're going to shift off ag issues now.
I could tell you, sure, I don't know, you know. I'm a pretty big fan of agriculture.
Well, we want to move on to your Strong and Safe Communities initiative. Tell us about that, and what is that? What does that mean?
Well, we started working on things like human trafficking, and we started working on train safety, and we started working on what's been happening in Indian country with a huge increase in perhaps even cartels on Indian country. And so where we're grateful for this economic boom, I think that in some ways we've left behind some of the part of our culture that is just so critically important for who we are as North Dakotans. And we thought, we're doing all these projects, let's kind of think about it the way I think about it, which is part of the role that we play as public officials is listening to what community needs are. And I think one of the primary responsibilities of any government is defense of our country, making sure that our borders are secure, but also making sure that we have public safety internally. And so that public safety takes its way in terms of making sure the trains are safe, takes its way in terms of making sure that we have enough law enforcement, that the reservations have enough federal law enforcement, but then also looking beyond that and looking at integrating more of the new people to our state, bringing them into our community and figuring out ways that we can get them to volunteer for the local fire department, volunteer for the ambulance service, introduce them to our churches. All of those things help build community. And so Strong and Safe Communities for me is that thing that makes us uniquely North Dakota, that we need to do everything that we can to hang on to and to enrich with the new North Dakotans that are coming to our state. So
Strong and Safe Communities, but obviously with the rising crime issue, and part of that's due to population influx, and maybe the oil boom is part of that, but not only in western North Dakota, but now we're seeing it all across the state.
Well, we were always seeing it all across the state. In fact, one of the first places that sounded the alarm on trafficking was Fargo. And Amy gives me a hard time because I always say, oh, it's coming in from the cities. She goes, why do you say that? And I say, well, because, we think all problems come from Minneapolis, I guess. But
and I assume Amy is Senator Klobuchar.
She gives me a hard time. Anyway, so I will tell you that this is not unique to western North Dakota. It's exacerbated in western North Dakota because you have this flood of money, and you have a flood of transient folks who are away from home, so maybe there's a lower barrier. And honestly, you have people coming to the communities. When I talk to the sheriffs out there, they'll say most of the people are coming, they're coming to work hard and they're coming to add to the community, but there's people who are coming to exploit. And we need to be on top of it all. We need to make sure that the federal government is doing its part. And nowhere should we be doing our part more than on our reservations, because and a lot of your viewers may not know this, the primary, the state's attorney doesn't have jurisdiction in Indian country. And who does on major crimes is the FBI, is the federal government. And they have to have enough personnel here to actually keep those communities safe as well. So that's been a big part of our discussion on crime. I could go on and on. The other thing you need to be worried about is we have the dark net, which, everybody does a Google search that only searches about that much of the internet, and there's a whole undernet or what we call the dark net, where there are things that are happening on the dark net that are not good for America. And we saw that with the fentanyl case up in Grand Forks. We've had regionally, I read a report, way too many fentanyl overdose deaths. We have an epidemic of heroin in this country, and it's coming to North Dakota. You talk to my friends who serve on drug task forces over the years, they will tell you they've never seen it. It's not just black tar, which we always had a little bit of. It is now white powder heroin is in our state. And Senator Klobuchar also told me that the emergency rooms in Minneapolis are being, run over by heroin overdoses. And so this is that we need to not. One of the things that happens, I think, way too often is we don't want to say we have the problem out loud. We want to kind of believe our own story that this is pristine and this never happens here. And I always say you can't solve a problem you won't recognize you have. And we have a growing problem with hard drugs in North Dakota, and we need to be prepared with law enforcement personnel. We need to be working, as we always have, in law enforcement cooperatively. I brought Ali Mayorkas, who's the deputy head of the Department of Homeland Security. We did a roundtable, and I think he was shocked by what he heard in Grand Forks. And so we'll continue to work on these issues and play the role that we should be appropriately playing on the federal side.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, let's move on maybe to economic issues. And what is your gauge on North Dakota's and the country's economic situation?
Well, the country continues to slowly climb its way out of the doldrums. We haven't seen yet anything that's going to spark an increase beyond 2%, 3% of gross domestic product growth. That may change over as we see employment numbers get better, employment numbers go up. But I will tell you, North Dakota is challenged by low commodity prices and high dollar values. It once again reinforces our argument that we need to diversify. I spent some time in my travels with young technology leaders in Fargo. That's this startup culture that we have here is very exciting. But I will tell you, one of the things that we all should be concerned about the economy is this huge disparity between wealth in this country and the huge income disparity. Those are two different things. It's what you own, one is what you earn, and earning potential has varied widely. And because we're fundamentally an economy, as most economies are, driven by consumption, when people are just eking out a living, they aren't able to do anything more than buy food and shelter and maybe an occasional piece of clothing for their children. When they're able to earn more and grow, then that's when they're going to afford houses. That helps the home builders. And so this economic disparity we have in this country has really, I think, stalled out our economy. We talk about it in terms of a civil rights issue or an equity issue. It's an economic issue that people can't make ends meet.
With that said, what about the minimum wage? Do you see that increasing?
I don't see it increasing in this Congress. And a number of states have kind of led the charge. I'm a big believer that the minimum wage should be increased, supported the 10-10, but we might have to retrench and think of something that's a little less, that gives us more permanency. But I will tell you this, the other tool that we have is the Earned Income Tax Credit. Why do I bring that up? Because that's an important tool to help people who are secretaries and our janitors and people who are raising children and struggling, to give them a tax break. Don't give the tax break to the richest among us. Give a tax break to people who actually can advance their own kind of economic interest in a much bigger way and add to the economy. Unfortunately, the budget that was passed by the Senate, the Republican budget, decimates the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's exactly the wrong direction. And these are issues that don't get a lot of discussion. That budget document is a blueprint, and I think there's a lot to talk about in there. I think it's important that we get our fiscal house in order, but I will tell you that there's not much in there to address income disparity.
Okay. With that said, let's turn to health care for a moment. Health care, the Affordable Care Act, and how do you think it's going? And of course, is it working and is it here to stay?
North Dakota has always had a high rate of insurance. Health insurance. I think it's just part of our culture. We're better at mitigating risk. We do it all the time on the farm. And so we come from a place where we say, look, paying a little bit now is better than owing a lot more later. And so it probably hasn't had as great an impact in North Dakota. Obviously, I will tell you this, in terms of, I think there's policy changes that need to be made. I have a bill that I've led since I've been there to change the 50-person requirement for small businesses to a 100-person requirement. That helps our startup industries, that helps, kind of those emerging small businesses. But all of that stalled out, waiting for the Supreme Court to decide a case that we call King v. Burwell, which is a case about whether the subsidies and the tax benefits that are available on the federal exchange are legal. I think once that case is decided at the end of June, which we expect the Supreme Court will end their term, and that'll be the last case decided, reported, that what we'll see is a flood then of things that should be fixed. And so either repeal it or fix it. I would tell you, what I say about the Affordable Care Act is there's good and bad in the Affordable Care Act. And let's fix the bad and move on and actually begin to deal with health care. And health care is changing every day, a lot of it driven by very insightful healthcare leaders who say this idea of paying per procedure is probably done. We now need to pay for health care. I'm a big believer we need to integrate our public health. I saw it in tobacco control, our public health work with our curative medicine work. And so you're going to see a whole kind of broader discussion about health care after we get through kind of the Obamacare politics.
Senator, you've got 15 seconds to tell me, what do you love about your job, and where can people go to find out more information?
Well, I tell you, I love serving North Dakota. I just love North Dakotans, and so I have a project where I've been dealing with Vietnam vets that's been a labor of love, and I've met so many people who have worked so hard for our country. And you can get us on the website. Just Google Heitkamp and Senate, and you'll find any way to get a hold of me.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week, and as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the members of Prairie Public.